Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to part the Borlaug 100 celebration, and also for giving me this opportunity to talk very briefly on wheat for Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, for me and maybe also to several Africans, I would say it is unfortunate and indeed regrettable that Africa missed the Green Revolution that was set in motion in the 1960s and 70s and happened during that time, and even after almost half a century today, the African continent, most African countries are still grappling with poverty and food insecurity. Many narratives on the reasons behind why Africa didn't root the Green Revolution has been many, actually. Technological fitness, extension approach, unfavorable socio-economic agricultural landscape, like policies, irrigation, high cost of fertilizers, and so on and so forth. No matter what, as these problems exist still today, and even more serious, Africa has no option but application of the Green Revolution principles, the Green Revolution archetypes, by adapting to the continent's real condition, and of course emulating the best practices, blending with the advancing science and technology. To embracing such an approach actually would definitely present both the problem and the challenge. The challenge is that we have a backlog in Africa, and we have to catch up to these advances, and we have to operate in the era of climate change and globalization, which has not been so serious the last 50 or 60 years back. And the opportunity is actually, we have an opportunity because Africa has a latecomer, maybe a very latecomer advantage, that Africa can draw experiences accumulated from the Green Revolution, and of course, can draw best practices and technologies from advancing science and technology today. Having said this, I don't intend actually to summarize the whole of Africa, wheat production in Africa, but I will provide you a brief account of what wheat looks like in Africa. In fact, Africa is regarded as a continent of traditional crops, indigenous crops. Africa is known by maize, by beans, and more other indigenous crops, not in wheat, basically. And the production has been actually, when you talk of wheat production has been restricted in southern part of Africa, in North Africa, and in the highlands of Eastern Africa, like Ethiopia and Kenya. In fact, with the development of improved varieties, complemented with irrigation, the wheat production has been expanded to savanna regions and other areas. These are the major wheat production areas in Africa. The deep green, as indicated, those countries like Algeria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Kenya, Morocco, South Africa, and Tunisia, they produce more than 1 million tons per annum wheat currently. There are also other countries which produce wheat, but these are the major wheat-producing countries in Africa. But the reality now is, because of urbanization, because of population boom, especially the urban population is expected to increase by 300% by 2050, and because of the changing food habit, the demand for wheat in Africa is growing faster than for any other food crop in the continent. For instance, in the year 2011, Africa spent some 14 billion USD to import more than 30 million tons of wheat. And it is predicted that by 2050, Africa will, if it is in status quo, will spend more than 20 billion USD per annum for importing more than 60 million tons of wheat. In North Africa, about 25 million, and Sub-Saharan Africa, about 35 million tons of wheat will be imported by 2050. In fact, currently, several African countries could achieve wheat yields exceeding 6 tons per hectare, even beyond in the world average. You might see, however, the per capita wheat production from 1990 to 2010 is the lowest in Africa, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa. You can see the last, this is for Sub-Saharan Africa. Yesterday, Dr. Mohammed Sol told us in Algeria, in Morocco, some 230 kg per capita, the maximum was registered. But generally, the African average is very low. And in fact, this graph shows you the whole of Africa, sorry. In the first case, this is the gap. This is the production between 1960 to 2009. And this is the demand, actually, the yellow one. You can see how wide is the gap. This will be even more wider when you go to Sub-Saharan Africa. Sub-Saharan Africa means except that of northern part of Africa. So the demand for wheat is increasing in Africa. And again, because of this, the import is increasing year by year. Africa imports in all crops, in all commodities, like 50 billion USD per annum, of which a third of this import is for wheat. Again, you can see this graph. The yellow one is the consumption. The consumption is rapidly growing as we go from 80 and predicted 2050. Then the production is the blue one. It is still increasing, but not at the pace of consumption. But you can see, because of the gap between production and consumption, the import in the red line is increasing very rapidly. Now, why, when we import wheat, what is the challenge for Africa? Africa, on importing wheat, it will be challenged by supply disruptions from the exporter countries, because several of the exporting countries to Africa depend on rainfall. And as has been indicated over the years, whenever drought comes, the wheat export declines. And again, the price hike and price volatility in food markets, land allocation for biofuel, that also pressurize on food prices, speculative selling and buying behaviors, the huge export restrictions by exporting countries, and of course, a foreign exchange shortage by many sub-Saharan African countries will all affect the African wheat import. So the question is now whether the African governments, the policymakers, would risk the unstable import and continue to import, or can African governments produce on their own and reduce the wheat import to their countries? According to some studies,
Tengo varios estudios
Shifarrao and his colleagues,
y sus
in the year 2012, they made a study on 12 sub-Saharan African countries.
en los
These countries depend on rainfall for their crop production. And these countries produce
producen
wheat only less than 10% of the wheat
menos
their potential allows.
trigo.
The result of this study was that
Estudio fue
out of these 12 countries,
que de estos 12 países,
20 to 100% land
del 20 al 100%
can be economically
ser económicamente
and profitably
rentable
produce wheat under rain-fed condition.
para la producción de trigo
These are the countries
en condiciones de
shaded in green. I don't see the shades over there, but
no se ve muy bien
countries like Burundi,
pero países como Burundi,
countries like Ethiopia, Kenya, Madagascar, Rwanda,
Ruanda,
Uganda, these countries can profitably produce
pueden producir
wheat
realmente trigo
to the extent that they can avoid wheat imports from abroad.
en que no van a tener que no tendrían que necesitar importar.
From the studies, their conclusion was that
La conclusión fue
there is a strong evidence
que hay
these countries
pruebas de que estos países
can unleash their potential
pueden
and produce wheat
y producir
profitably under a fair condition. But these authors
rentable
worry that
temporal.
because of the low world prices of
Debido a los bajos
wheat
precios
and high fertilizer
y
costs,
altos costos de los fertilizantes
and because of the low productivity of wheat in these countries,
del trigo en estos países,
these countries may
estos países podrían
not able to compete
no ser capaces
in the world market
en
and
el
win
mercado mundial
under a fierce competition of globalization.
en
So,
la globalización.
what was recommended was
Y lo que se recomendó
there need to be investment in research and development to increase yields,
en investigación
and of course, there should be also research
también
to reduce the production and marketing costs.
reducir los costos de producción y
And their
comercialización.
conclusion is actually, they underline that the limiting
Los
factors
factores limitantes
are not agroecological,
no son de
but rather
ecológica, sino más
socio-cultural, institutional, and policy impediments
impedimentos
that
socioculturales institucionales
made these countries unable to
que
produce enough
puedan producir
and avoid reliance on imported wheat.
y tengan que importar trigo.
Why is not Africa already growing more wheat then?
África no está cultivando más.
There are two major reasons.
Hay dos motivos.
One is
Uno
the African governments
es que
didn't determine to produce wheat on their own,
no determinan
rather they prefer to subsidize and import wheat from abroad. The second one is the landscape,
Número dos,
the infrastructure bottlenecks in the wheat value chain
cuellos de botella en infraestructura
prevent farmers access to inputs,
que los
markets, and the grain market cost is already
y los
very
costos
high.
de comercialización ya son muy altos.
Therefore, Africa needs
África
many more
necesita muchos
on research and development,
más investigación,
more on research infrastructure,
en investigación
more on extension and extension capacity building,
de investigación,
more organization on cooperatives, organizing farmers, on awareness and support,
agrícolas, más
providing affordable inputs, on quality assurance, in machineries, small farm implements, on storage and post-harvest aspects.
y más implementación
Generally,
maquinaria.
there is a need to overhaul the whole system in a very transformative way along the value chain. So, what are the key issues for Africa?
¿Cuáles son las
One is developing suitable technologies and varieties and adapting to the local conditions,
variedades que se adaptan
making affordable inputs available to farmers,
a insumos?
building effective and sustainable wheat seed systems. Seed system is very critical.
Hay que
In many African countries,
semillas
it's only the informal
y efectivos
system operating. The formal system is at a very limited scale.
sistema a un
So farmers are not able to get
los productores no
enough and adequate and quality seeds. Of course, the wheat extension system to provide farmers
si hay un
the basic knowledge and awareness on wheat production,
sistema y la conciencia
increasing the productivity of smallholder farmers through agronomy and breeding, whatever is very critical,
productores
Making wheat more competitive and profitable is very important. And of course, working on wheat value chains and regional cooperation among different African countries and beyond. And above all, appropriate policies that foster wheat industry. There should be a political will to realize Africa's wheat potential. In fact, I would like to tell you that there are attempts this time, and wheat is labeled Africa's strategic commodity at this very time. How that happens? In the year 2012, October, there was a science and policy dialogue about the future of wheat in Africa under the theme of wheat for security in Africa, a conference that was held in Addis Ababa. This was a landmark international conference, bringing together more than 250 scientists, policymakers, seed companies all over the world. And what happened? The participants of this conference, they endorsed that wheat should be a strategic food security crop in Africa. Then, following this, immediately within an immense period of time, the joint African Ministers of Agriculture and Trade, they endorsed that wheat as one of Africa's strategic commodity for achieving food and nutritional security. Following that, a high-level forum for agricultural research in Africa meeting in Accra developed a strategy for promoting African wheat production. Therefore, wheat has got momentum in Africa, and it is declared to be one of the strategic crops for food security. Next, I will just mention you as a case how wheat revolution is in the making in three countries in Africa. One is in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, Ethiopia is one of the countries, starting from the low base, achieving the CAADP target, Comprehensive Agricultural Development Program of the Africa, the NEPAD, that sets a target of 6% average annual growth rate. Ethiopia has achieved that, and several other countries also achieved that. In Ethiopia, we have wheat is a priority crop for the national food security under its growth and transformation plan. And of course, Ethiopia is the largest wheat producer in sub-Saharan Africa, other than North Africa. And wheat production has increased more than 400% since 2000. The current national average yield, starting from less than 1 ton a decade ago, it has come now to 2.4 ton per hectare. And of course, this year, a new record harvest of 4 million metric ton has been registered, despite the rust minus the stem rust that has been reported to you during this very conference. The second one is on, this is how the Ethiopian wheat industry has grown over the years. You can see from this point, it has started about, it has reached about 4 million metric ton. Another point I would like to make is the government commitment, as has been discussed this week. The Ethiopia provided one of its research center for wheat screening that served the CGIAR centers, CIMMYT, and others. And in fact, the second one is Nigeria. Nigeria imports about 4 million tons wheat per annum, and it spends about 4 billion USD per annum. And the demand is about 4.1 million tons in 2012 and 13. Because of a ban on wheat imports in 97, the wheat production had increased from 50,000 to 600,000 tons on this amount of land. And currently, the Nigerian government is committed to increase local production, and it sets target to reduce imports by 50% in the year 2015, and to meet its annual demand by 27 within home-produced wheat. Another is Rwanda. Rwanda has got a crop intensification program. Again, this country achieved fourfold increase from 20 ton to 76 ton in 2012. This is because of the best practices and varieties that have been used. Of course, with subsidies and other incentive package, this country also recorded a very good success. To conclude, very briefly, it's time to recognize the critical importance and role that wheat plays for food security, economic development, and social and political stability in Africa. The current trends of increasing reliance on imports are not sustainable and even threaten nutrition and economic security and stability. But there is a big potential for economic profitable wheat production in sub-Saharan Africa to meet the growing demand. The limiting factors, as I said it already, are not agroecological. It is rather socio-cultural, institutional, and policy. It needs government commitment, a policy commitment. Increased measures are needed to decisively increase wheat production, productivity, and self-sufficiency in Africa. With this all, it is possible to bring about a second revolution, a green revolution, a wheat revolution in Africa. Thank you very much.